From the ashes of a burning battlefield, a republic was forged in iron and blood. Legions marched to claim the ancient world, carving an empire that would echo through the ages.
For centuries, Rome had fought wars because it had no choice. It fought neighboring peoples who threatened its borders. It fought rivals who challenged its influence. It fought armies that were larger, wealthier, and sometimes more experienced. But Rome possessed something its enemies repeatedly underestimated: the ability to survive.
In the year 280 BCE, Rome faced an enemy unlike any it had encountered before. The army of Pyrrhus of Epirus had crossed the Adriatic Sea, carrying the traditions of the Hellenistic world. It was an army shaped by the legacy of Alexander the Great. Professional soldiers, experienced commanders, elite cavalry, and weapons designed for a battlefield Rome had never seen. Among them were war elephants, massive animals that would transform the battle before them.
The Roman army was not the professional force of the later empire. These were citizens, farmers, craftsmen, and landowners called away from ordinary life to serve the Republic. They fought not for a king. They fought for a political system that was still young enough to remember when survival itself was uncertain.
Across the battlefield stood Pyrrhus of Epirus, a commander whose reputation had been built in the violent struggles of the Hellenistic world. He represented a different tradition of warfare, one where kings commanded professional armies, and battles could decide the fate of kingdoms.
For the Romans, these animals represented something unfamiliar. Rome had fought many enemies, but now it faced a force built from another world. A world of kings, professional armies, and battlefield traditions stretching back generations.
Before Rome became the center of an empire, Italy was a world of competing peoples. The peninsula was divided by mountains, rivers, and rival communities. There was no single Italian nation. Instead, hundreds of settlements and tribes occupied the landscape, each protecting its own traditions, territories, and ambitions. To the north and center lived Italic peoples and the powerful Etruscans. Along the southern coastline, Greek settlers had established wealthy cities connected to the wider Mediterranean world. Rome was born into this environment, a world where survival depended on adaptation.
The earliest Rome developed beside the Tiber River. The location was strategically valuable. The river provided access to trade routes. The surrounding hills offered protection. The settlement stood at a natural crossing point between northern and southern Italy. Rome was not founded as the capital of a future empire. It began as a community that occupied a useful place in a contested landscape. Its future power came later. The first Romans were not emperors, generals, or conquerors. They were farmers, craftsmen, traders, and families building a community. The future power of Rome would be created by ordinary people, repeatedly drawn into extraordinary circumstances. For centuries, Roman identity would be shaped by a simple reality: the survival of the community depended on the actions of its citizens.
Rome's early development was deeply influenced by its neighbors. Among the most important were the Etruscans. The Etruscans controlled much of central Italy and possessed a highly developed civilization with advanced architecture, trade networks, and religious traditions. They built cities, engineered infrastructure, and maintained connections across the Mediterranean. Compared with these established powers, early Rome was still a developing community. Through contact with the Etruscans, Rome absorbed ideas that would shape its future: architecture, religious practices, political organization, urban planning. Rome's rise was not created in isolation. It was built through interaction with the civilizations around it. The city that would eventually dominate the Mediterranean first learned by observing its neighbors.
The Mediterranean was not a barrier.
It was a highway. Goods, ideas, technologies, and conflicts moved across its waters. The peoples of Italy were connected to a much larger world, and as Rome grew, it would increasingly become involved in struggles far beyond the hills surrounding the Tiber. At the beginning of its history, Rome was only one community among many. It had no empire, no professional army, no control over Italy. Its future was uncertain. But the challenges surrounding Rome would shape it. Every rival, every invasion, every political struggle would force the city to adapt, and adaptation would become Rome's greatest strength. According to Roman tradition, the city's kings were eventually overthrown, and a new political order was created, the Roman Republic, a system that would transform the relationship between power, citizenship, and war. Roman tradition remembered its earliest history through the stories of kings. The ancient accounts described a succession of rulers who shaped the city's foundations. But the final king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, became the symbol of everything Romans feared about monarchy: unchecked power. According to later Roman writers, his removal marked the beginning of a new political order, the Republic. The exact events surrounding the creation of the Republic remain debated. The stories preserved by Roman historians were written centuries later and combined historical memory with political tradition. But by the 5th century BCE, Rome had developed a republican system. Instead of a permanent monarch, power was divided among elected officials and competing institutions. The Romans would later view this system as one of their greatest achievements. The Republic replaced the authority of one ruler with a system of shared power. Each year, Rome elected 2 chief magistrates known as consuls. They commanded armies, they led government, they represented the state. But their authority was limited. They could be challenged, they could be replaced, and they served for a short period of time. The system was designed around one central fear: that too much power in one person's hands could destroy the state. The Senate became one of Rome's most influential institutions. Originally an advisory council of aristocratic families, it developed enormous authority over diplomacy, finance, and public decisions. The Republic was not a democracy in the modern sense. Power was concentrated among wealthy citizens. But unlike the kingdoms surrounding Rome, political influence was not permanently held by a single ruler. Competition became part of Roman politics. But the Republic was not only created by aristocrats. Its armies depended on ordinary citizens. The men who fought Rome's wars were not professional soldiers. They were farmers, craftsmen, and landowners who left their communities when the Republic called. Military service was one of the foundations of Roman citizenship. To belong to Rome meant having obligations to Rome. The Republic was never a perfectly unified society. From its earliest centuries, Rome was divided by social tensions. The wealthy patrician families dominated political power. The broader population, known as plebeians, demanded greater rights and representation. This struggle would become one of the defining internal conflicts of early Roman history. Through political struggle, new institutions emerged. Among them were the tribunes of the plebs. These officials represented ordinary citizens and gained powers designed to protect them from abuses of authority. The Republic was changing, not through peaceful design alone, through pressure, conflict, and compromise. The Roman Republic developed under constant pressure. Its politics were competitive. Its society was divided. Its neighbors were dangerous.
Yet these challenges created a system capable of adaptation. Rome's leaders competed for influence. Its citizens competed for recognition. Its armies competed against enemies. Conflict became part of the Roman experience. And soon, Rome would face the first great test of its new republic. Rome's political transformation gave it the tools to survive. But survival required action. Beyond the walls of the city waited rivals who would test the strength of the republic. The next centuries would decide whether Rome remained one Italian city among many, or became the power that united the peninsula.
The Roman army began with a simple principle. The citizens of Rome were the defenders of Rome. There was no permanent professional army. When danger appeared, citizens were called away from their farms and communities to serve in campaigns. Military service was not separate from Roman life. It was one of the responsibilities of citizenship.
The soldiers of early Rome were not the famous legionaries of later centuries. They did not wear the armor associated with imperial Rome. They fought with equipment that reflected the society they came from. A Roman soldier was first a citizen. His weapons were not symbols of a professional warrior class. They were tools carried by ordinary men, temporarily transformed into defenders of the Republic. Rome's greatest military advantage was not a single weapon. It was organization. The Republic could repeatedly gather large numbers of citizens, organize them into armies, and replace losses after defeat. A Roman victory was rarely dependent on one brilliant commander. It depended on the strength of the entire system behind the army. But before Rome could dominate Italy, it first had to survive among its neighbors. The Italian peninsula was a world of competing powers. Rome faced Latin communities that shared cultural ties but competed for influence. The Samnites, powerful mountain peoples who controlled the central Apennines. Greek cities in the south connected to the wider Mediterranean. Rome's rise would come through conflict with all of them. Rome's first major conflicts were not fought against distant kingdoms. They were fought against neighbors. The Latin peoples shared language and traditions with Rome. They worshipped similar gods. They lived in the same region. But they also competed for land, influence, and security. Shared identity did not prevent conflict. By the 4th century BCE, Rome had become powerful enough that former allies began to fear its growing influence. The conflict, known as the Latin War, brought Rome into direct confrontation with other Latin communities. The outcome would determine who controlled the heart of Italy. Rome's victory revealed a pattern that would become central to its expansion. It did not always destroy defeated enemies. Instead, Rome created different relationships with conquered communities. Some received citizenship. Others became allies bound to Rome through treaties. The system was complex. It could be harsh, but it created something unusual: a growing network of communities connected to Roman power. Rome was developing a new method of power. Conquered peoples were not simply enemies removed from the map. They became part of a larger Roman system. Every alliance created new obligations. Every victory created new resources. Every war increased Rome's ability to fight the next one. But Rome's next enemy would be unlike any it had faced before. In the mountains of central Italy lived a people who would test Rome's armies, destroy its confidence, and force the Republic to transform. The Samnites. Beyond the fertile plains of central Italy rose the Apennine Mountains. Here lived the Samnites. They were not a primitive people waiting to be conquered. They were experienced warriors who understood the land they inhabited. Their homeland was a world of mountains, forests, and narrow passages. For an army accustomed to open battlefields, Samnium presented a dangerous challenge. The Samnites were organized differently from Rome. They were a collection of communities connected through shared identity and military tradition. Their warriors were adapted to the landscape they defended. They knew the mountains. They understood movement through difficult terrain. And they would force Rome to fight a different kind of war. The conflict between Rome and Samnium began over competing interests in central and southern Italy. At first, Rome believed it could use its growing influence to shape events beyond its borders. But the mountains changed everything. The enemy was not simply another army. The enemy was the environment itself. The Samnite wars were not decided by one battle. They stretched across generations. They involved marches through hostile territory, alliances shifting between communities, sieges of fortified settlements, and armies repeatedly rebuilt after losses. This was not a conflict between a rising power and a weak opponent. Rome had encountered a rival capable of challenging its ambitions. Rome's greatest advantage was not that it avoided mistakes. It was that it learned from them. The challenges of fighting in Italy encouraged changes in Roman military organization. The army became more flexible. Units became capable of operating independently. Rome adapted because failure demanded it. In 321 BCE, Rome suffered one of the most humiliating defeats in its early history. A Roman army entered a narrow mountain passage known as the Caudine Forks. The Samnites had prepared a trap. The Romans found themselves surrounded. Their options disappeared. Their army was trapped not by strength of numbers, but by the landscape itself. The defeat was devastating. Roman soldiers were forced to surrender. Ancient sources describe humiliating terms imposed by the Samnites. The exact details of the event come through later Roman accounts and must be treated carefully. But the historical significance is clear. Rome had been defeated, and the Republic now faced a choice: accept limitation or continue the struggle. Many states were destroyed by defeats like this. Rome responded differently. The Republic raised new armies. It strengthened alliances. It continued fighting. The defeat at the Caudine Forks became part of a pattern that would define Roman history. Disaster did not end Roman wars. It often intensified them. After decades of conflict, Rome finally broke Samnite resistance. The victory did not come from a single moment of brilliance. It came from endurance. Rome had survived repeated defeats and transformed itself through experience. The republic that entered the war was not the same republic that emerged. It had become more organized, more experienced, and far more powerful. The Samnite Wars changed the balance of power in Italy. Rome was no longer simply defending its homeland. It was becoming the dominant force of the peninsula. But one challenge remained: the Greek cities of southern Italy. Beyond them was a wider Mediterranean world. And soon Rome would face a commander whose reputation reached across that world. Rome had defeated the peoples of Italy. Now, it would face a different kind of enemy. A king, a professional army, and the legacy of Alexander the Great. For centuries, Greek settlers had built powerful cities along the southern coast of Italy. This region was known as Magna Graecia, Greater Greece. These cities were connected to the wider Mediterranean world. They possessed wealthy ports, established trade networks, artistic traditions, and military experience shaped by centuries of Greek warfare. To them, Rome was still a newcomer, a powerful Italian state,
but not yet a Mediterranean power. Among the Greek cities of southern Italy, Tarentum was one of the most powerful. Its harbor connected it to Greece and the eastern Mediterranean. Its wealth came from trade. Its identity came from Greek culture. But Tarentum's position placed it directly beside an expanding Roman Republic. The two powers were moving closer. Conflict became increasingly difficult to avoid. Rome's expansion into southern Italy changed the balance of power. The Republic now controlled much of the peninsula. Its armies had defeated the Samnites. Its alliances stretched farther than ever before. But expansion brought Rome into contact with powers beyond Italy. The Greek cities could no longer ignore Rome, and Rome could no longer ignore the Mediterranean. When Tarentum sought assistance against Rome, it turned to one of the most ambitious rulers of the Greek world, Pyrrhus of Epirus. A descendant of the Hellenistic royal tradition, Pyrrhus was a skilled commander who had spent his life in the wars that followed the death of Alexander the Great. He was not simply defending a city. He saw an opportunity, a chance to create a Western kingdom worthy of the great powers of the Greek world. Pyrrhus brought an army unlike anything Rome had previously faced. It included professional soldiers trained for years of warfare. The core was the Hellenistic phalanx, a formation of heavily armed infantry moving as a single mass. Supporting them were elite cavalry units, experienced officers, and elephants used as battlefield weapons. This was the military tradition that had conquered much of the known world under Alexander's successors. Rome responded with the army that had carried it across Italy. Not an army of professional warriors, an army of citizens. The Roman system relied on depth. If soldiers fell, more could be recruited. If armies were destroyed, new ones could be raised. Rome's strength was not only the army standing on the battlefield, it was the society behind it. The two armies met near Heraclea. For the first time, Rome faced a major Hellenistic army on the battlefield. The outcome would reveal the strengths and weaknesses of both systems. At first, the battle was a contest between two different methods of warfare. The Roman formation was flexible. Individual units could maneuver independently. The Greek phalanx was rigid but powerful. When its ranks remained intact, it was extremely difficult to break. The turning point came when Pyrrhus deployed his elephants. The animals created confusion among Roman troops and disrupted their formations. Rome had faced many enemies, but this was something unfamiliar. The battlefield itself had changed. Pyrrhus won, but the victory came at a heavy cost. The Romans had lost the battle, yet their army had survived, and the Republic remained capable of continuing the war. For Pyrrhus, this was the first sign of a problem that would define the conflict. Winning battles would not necessarily defeat Rome. A year later, the armies met again at Asculum. Again, Pyrrhus achieved victory. Again, Rome refused to collapse. The pattern became clear. Pyrrhus could defeat Roman armies, but Rome possessed resources and determination beyond what many Hellenistic rulers expected. Ancient tradition later connected Pyrrhus with the idea that victories achieved at enormous cost were ultimately dangerous. The exact words attributed to him are uncertain, but the historical reality is clear. The war was becoming unsustainable. A commander could win battles, but a kingdom could not endlessly replace its losses against a republic with vast manpower. The conflict with Pyrrhus changed Rome forever. For the first time, Rome had fought one of the great military powers of the Mediterranean world, and it had survived. By defeating Pyrrhus, Rome proved that it was no longer merely an Italian power. It was ready to enter a larger arena. After Pyrrhus withdrew from Italy, Rome continued its campaign against the remaining Greek resistance. In 272 BCE, Tarentum surrendered. The most powerful Greek city in southern Italy had fallen under Roman control. The conquest was complete. Rome now dominated the Italian peninsula. Rome's victory did not create a simple, centralized kingdom. Instead, it created a network. Some communities became Roman citizens. Others became allies bound by treaties. Each relationship was different, but together they formed a system that gave Rome access to enormous human and material resources. This alliance system became one of Rome's greatest strengths. Rome did not simply conquer Italy, it reorganized Italy around itself. The communities that once fought against Rome now provided soldiers, resources, and strategic support. Every war expanded the system. Every victory strengthened the next campaign. But Roman expansion carried consequences. Decades of warfare had transformed Italian society. Thousands of men had served in campaigns. Communities had been defeated and reorganized. Land had changed hands. The Republic was stronger, but it had also become a society increasingly shaped by war. For centuries, Rome had been a land power. Its victories came from armies marching across Italy. But control of the peninsula created a new challenge: the Mediterranean. To compete beyond Italy, Rome needed something it had never truly possessed: a navy. Rome's approach to war had always been practical. When confronted with a problem, it adapted. The Republic studied the ships and methods of Mediterranean powers around it. It recruited expertise. It copied successful designs. And it prepared for a new kind of conflict. By the middle of the 3rd century BCE, the balance of power in the Western Mediterranean had changed. Rome controlled Italy. But across the sea stood another great power: Carthage. Carthage was unlike any enemy Rome had faced. Founded by Phoenician settlers centuries earlier, it had become a major maritime and commercial power. Its influence stretched across the Western Mediterranean. Its wealth came from trade. Its strength came from the sea. Rome and Carthage had developed in different worlds. Rome was a republic of citizens and soldiers. Carthage was a maritime empire of merchants, fleets, and overseas territories. Neither Rome nor Carthage originally sought a struggle for total domination. Their first conflicts emerged from competing interests. But both powers were expanding. Both depended on influence. Both believed their future required control of the Western Mediterranean. The collision was approaching. Rome had begun as a small community beside a river. It survived kings. It survived rival cities. It survived defeats that should have ended its ambitions. Through every conflict, Rome changed. Its armies became stronger. Its alliances expanded. Its citizens became soldiers. And its victories carried it beyond the borders of Italy. But power creates new enemies. Across the Mediterranean stood Carthage, a civilization with wealth, fleets, and ambitions of its own. The wars that forged Rome had prepared it for survival. The next wars would decide whether Rome was ready for empire.